Why we're all addicted to self-improvement, and why it's holding us back. You wake up and reach for your phone. Before your feet even touch the floor, your feed has already served you 3 productivity hacks, a fitness influencer's morning routine, and a motivational quote reminding you that mediocrity is a choice. You haven't even brushed your teeth, and you already feel behind. We live in a culture obsessed with self-improvement. Hustle harder, optimize your life, master your mindset, be the best version of yourself. These messages are everywhere. Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, books, newsletters, courses, and they all whisper the same idea. Who you are right now isn't enough. Improvement isn't the problem. Growth is good. But what happens when the pursuit of better becomes endless? What happens when the desire to evolve becomes an addiction in disguise? We start to measure ourselves by our aspirations rather than our values, by what we consume rather than what we create, by who we might become, not who we are. In that space, it becomes easy to forget that contentment isn't complacency. That self-worth shouldn't depend on how optimized your morning routine is or how many journals you fill. And somewhere in that process, we stop asking, why? Why do we want to be better? For whom? Toward what end? Self-improvement, when untethered from self-awareness, becomes just another treadmill, motion without meaning. Self-improvement used to be a private journey. Now it's a broadcast. We're not just meditating. We're posting about our streaks. We're not just journaling. We're sharing aesthetic flat lays of our gratitude lists. We're not just reading. We're tweeting quotes, highlighting passages, reviewing on Goodreads. And this is where social media changes the game. It's no longer about who you're becoming. It's about who sees it. We've merged growth with branding, discipline with image. Even healing has become something we showcase. And slowly, the line between actual progress and performative effort blurs. When we perform our progress, we start chasing applause instead of transformation. The reward becomes likes, not insight. We start doing things not because they move us, but because they look good from the outside. And when healing becomes a trend, we start to confuse visibility with value. But healing is often invisible. Progress is often silent. The danger is subtle but real. We become more concerned with appearing transformed than actually doing the work of transformation. We curate vulnerability, but only the photogenic kind. We show the journal, but not the mess inside it. Social networks don't just reflect trends, they amplify them. They reward the content that performs, and self-improvement content performs. Videos promising 10x productivity go viral. Clips titled, "Morning Routine That Changed My Life," rake in millions of views. It's dopamine in disguise. Instead of candy or gossip, you're fed the illusion of empowerment. But the algorithm doesn't care if what you're watching actually helps you. It cares if it keeps you watching. So you're fed an endless stream of fixes, systems, frameworks, tips. And the more you consume, the more inadequate you feel. Instead of inspiring you, it begins to paralyze you. You're drowning in advice and yet still searching. We start mistaking knowledge for change. We think watching another 5-minute hack will finally shift our habits. But watching isn't doing. Knowing isn't becoming. In chasing the next insight, we often delay the actual work. Growth becomes entertainment. Change becomes content. And worse, our sense of identity becomes reactive. We internalize not what's useful to us, but what's trending. We begin to chase lives that aren't even ours. There's a difference between being productive and being enslaved by productivity. The modern mind has been conditioned to measure worth by output. How many books you read, how many steps you walk, how many hours you work. Even rest becomes a means to an end. Recharging, just so you can work harder tomorrow. You begin to feel guilty for doing nothing. Relaxing becomes suspicious. Leisure becomes laziness. But the soul doesn't thrive on metrics. It thrives on presence. And when everything you do is optimized, you stop feeling. You stop experiencing. You start executing your life instead of living it. This constant optimization rewires how we relate to joy. Joy starts to feel unproductive. We abandon hobbies that don't scale, avoid moments that don't fit into a plan. We lose touch with play, with spontaneity, and in that gap, life becomes a task list. Even our relationships become transactional. Quality time, scheduled between sprints, intimacy turned into check-ins, emotional availability slotted in as a task. The self-improvement industry sells you a fantasy that there's always another level to unlock, that with the right planner, the right mindset, the right hack, you'll finally become the perfect you. But life isn't linear. Growth isn't always forward. Healing loops, energy fluctuates, confidence breaks and rebuilds. Becoming better sometimes looks like standing still. Sometimes it looks like rest. Sometimes it means letting go. We don't talk about those parts because they don't look good on camera. But they're just as real. Real progress includes backslides. It includes doubt. It includes stillness that's misunderstood as laziness and pauses that are mistaken for giving up. We need to normalize the ebb, not just celebrate the flow. We need to remember that a season of slowness isn't a failure, it's wisdom. And we need to stop confusing effort with value. Growth isn't about perpetual motion. It's about meaningful movement, even if it's slow. One of the most seductive lies self-improvement tells us is that everything will be better later, after the next course, after the next challenge, after the next habit sticks. And so we chase and chase and chase. But in that pursuit, we postpone presence. We delay contentment. We avoid who we are today because we're obsessed with who we might be tomorrow. And while the surface looks disciplined, underneath it's often avoidance in disguise. Growth becomes a socially acceptable way to run from ourselves. When we are always becoming, we forget how to be. We mistake constant striving for actual change. We use busyness to avoid intimacy with others and with ourselves. And often, the most radical thing we can do is stop. To sit in the discomfort of now and trust that it's enough. It is in that pause, where we aren't trying to improve or produce, that our real fears surface. That's when we see ourselves clearly, without the filters of goals. And that clarity, that's the beginning of actual change. Eventually, something cracks. You meditate, journal, cold plunge, and work a full day, and still feel empty. You've read every self-help book on your shelf and still feel stuck. You've built habits and still feel exhausted. Because burnout doesn't only come from overworking, it also comes from over-optimizing. If your entire life is filled with tools meant to help you function, and you still can't feel joy or peace, the problem might not be your systems. It might be your expectations. You were never meant to operate like a machine. The very frameworks designed to support us begin to suffocate us. Routines become rigid. Rituals become rules. And self-help morphs into self-surveillance. Eventually, your calendar looks perfect, but your soul feels hollow. Your habits are in place, but your curiosity is gone. Your goals are checked off, but you don't know why you started. The body knows. It resists, it slows down, it breaks just to be heard. That's not failure. That's wisdom speaking through fatigue. Not everything needs to be shared. Not every improvement needs applause. Not every transformation needs to be documented. Some growth happens in the dark, quietly, softly, off camera. But in a world where we've been taught that if it's not seen, it doesn't count, we forget that private healing is valid, that boundaries are growth, that silence is sacred. You don't owe anyone proof of your evolution. The deepest healing often happens in solitude, in mornings spent with your own breath, in evenings where you let go without needing to explain why, in choosing privacy over performance. That isn't hiding, that's honoring. What if you didn't need another book, another hack, another plan? What if who you are now isn't a pre-version of your best self, but a full self right now? What if you defined success by how you feel in your own skin, not by how you look on paper. Being enough doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop growing from a place of shame. Self-improvement should come from self-respect, not self-rejection. And the truth is, enoughness isn't earned, it's remembered. It's the baseline you come home to. The starting point, not the finish line. When we stop trying to earn our worth, we begin to live differently. We create from wholeness. We rest without guilt. We connect without proving. The bravest thing you can do in a world that demands constant progress is to pause, to be still, to not perform, to not optimize, to not monetize, to just exist. Because that pause, that's where you meet yourself. And when you meet yourself, not your curated self, not your in-progress self, but your actual self, you realize something. You were never behind. You were just convinced you had to keep running. You don't need to catch up. You need to come back. Self-improvement often masks a deeper hunger, the desire to control. If we can fix ourselves, maybe we can fix our lives. If we become more efficient, maybe the chaos won't touch us. If we level up enough, maybe we won't be hurt again. But life doesn't play by those rules. Growth won't protect you from grief. Success won't shield you from suffering. There is no hack that makes you invulnerable. Control is comforting, but it's an illusion. And sometimes the most healing thing we can do is surrender to mess, to uncertainty, to our own limits. What if becoming better didn't mean breaking yourself first? What if transformation wasn't about pressure, but about presence? You don't need to burn out to begin again. You don't need to fall apart to grow. You don't need to hate where you are to move towards something more. What you need is gentleness, grace, time. You are allowed to change slowly, quietly. You are allowed to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress. You are allowed to become without breaking. Because real growth, it doesn't demand that you suffer. It invites you to listen.